Hello and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we'll be reviewing Nobody. Nobody is directed by Ilya Naishuller and stars Bob Odenkirk in the titular role. After a home invasion, a chain of events is triggered that finds main character Hutch reckoning with his buried past and a Russian drug lord threatening his family and his new life. This film also stars Christopher Lloyd and RZA. So Matt, what did you think of Nobody?
So Bob Odenkirk stars as this family man who is kind of like played off as being a wuss at first. He doesn't really take this home invasion, and he doesn't really take this shot when he wants to, but he decides not to. And his family kind of look poorly on him for that, as well as his neighbor. And this kind of like expands further into the movie, and he becomes to be more than we assumed that he was at the beginning. But, other than that, Bob Odenkirk, he does a fantastic job in this movie. I don't think this movie is anything really original. I think this movie kind of plays out like a John Wick or something similar to that. Other than that, though, I really did have a good time with this movie. I think the action sequences were really great. I think Christopher Lloyd, he makes what seems to me like a cameo at first and ends up being a little bit more than that. I'm not going to go into that too far because I don't want to spoil it, but what his role ends up being is actually really kind of fun. And Bob Odenkirk and Christopher Lloyd make this movie to me.
Yeah, I agree. So when this movie started, I thought it was going to be one of these kind of fragile masculinity movies that he's kind of a wuss who learns how to break bad, so to speak, and protect his family. It ends up being something that's pretty different from that. I'm going to start off with the action sequences, which I really think are stellar. Chris Stuckman always talks about how it's so important to get the actors in shots when you're doing action sequences because it kind of heightens the stakes because you feel like they're really in these situations that danger is imminent, right? And Bob Odenkirk is in most of the shots here. They're not doing these kind of showy, unbroken, crazy shots, but he's doing a lot of the stunt work himself. He's always in the scene. It's not obvious body doubles when he's in action sequences. I think that adds a lot of tension and a lot of fun to the action sequences. The action sequences are also pretty violent, I think, in a fun way. I know that sounds kind of messed up, but I think they're kind of brutal in a way that's very different from the John Wick movies. The John Wick movies almost feel like just this shoot 'em up kind of video game, and that is fun in its own way. These kind of have more knives, household objects. He incorporates a lot of different things into the action sequences. I think that kind of make it more of a variety.
Yeah, there's this kind of scene that plays out in a bus. And It's the first time where he cracks and you kind of see what he's actually capable of. And he just pulls the pole off like a handle pole that people hold in a bus.
Yeah.
And he does something fun with that. And then there was a little bit of a scene where I could not look at because it was a little too gory for me.
Yeah. This movie's really violent in a way that I think is actually kind of fun.
I think that was probably the worst scene of it for me.
Yeah. I could almost call it gleefully violent. You have to, I don't know, if you're offended easily by violence, this may not be the movie for you, but if you can let go and realize it's a movie, it's kind of fun.
Depending on the amount of goriness you could kind of handle. I just kind of hid behind my blanket for a couple scenes. Yeah. But other than that, I thought it was a blast. There was a point where it's kind of this big battle near the end, and he loads up these gun things with a bunch of metal rods, and I'm like, I know what's going to be used for those. Because you kind of get a sense of where this movie is going with the kind of violent intent that it has and the goriness that it's displaying. And when I saw him loading up those guns with those metal rods, I knew exactly what they're going to be used for, and that's exactly what happened. But I really enjoyed it still, nonetheless.
Yeah, it's like R-rated Home Alone. This movie is very predictable, and I never for an instant felt like our main characters were in danger, but I didn't really care for some reason. I guess it was just too much fun, and it just was taking itself so not seriously that was part of the enjoyment much more so. I actually think that if they would have dragged out the stakes and made me think that perhaps the main character was going to die, it would kind of annoy me. I would see its conventions working a bit more.
Yeah, this movie really doesn't care about plot so much as the action sequences. You get a little bit plot in the beginning, kind of how his son is feeling about him. You get a little tension there. You see there's tension with his wife. They're sleeping with pillows between them at night. Mm-hmm. But none of that's really held up into such a meaningful way later on in the film. It just kind of goes away in a sense, or it's rectified pretty easily. So I don't think the plot is really where this movie's at, but I think the movie knows that as well.
I want to go back to something you were talking about, which is Christopher Lloyd. I'm not going to elaborate too much more, but he is definitely my favorite performance here. And I think that they used his casting really well because we all have a kind of idea of Christopher Lloyd from the Back to the Future movies, that's how we think of him in this wholesome way. So they really used that against us in a way that I thought was pretty brilliant and hilarious.
No, I completely agree. Christopher Lloyd was the best thing about this movie, in my opinion.
And he's 82 years old, and there's some scenes in this movie where it's it's just awesome that you're doing this at 82 years old. I think maybe one of the weak parts, aside from the predictability, is the villain. The villain is just a little lackluster. We really don't learn too much about him. He doesn't have much characterization or depth or anything. And he doesn't need a tremendous amount of that. I think he just needs a little bit. Like, we get a good sense of Bob Odenkirk's character and what his character arc is. The villain doesn't really have an arc. He doesn't really have a motivation. He's just kind of like a ruthless jackass who likes money. That's all I can really get out of him.
Yeah, I didn't really care that his character didn't really have much of a plot or an arc. I think the movie kind of treated him as if he was meaningless, and I think that plays out in kind of the karaoke scenes where he's just singing and people in the audience don't really give a shit about what he's doing, and he kind of thinks he's the center of the universe in his own mind. And I just didn't really see a problem with that because I felt like the movie was treating him as if he was nothing.
I mean, I agree the movie is treating him like he's nothing. I think it's doing it intentionally. That is, I don't really like that about the villain, but I would say a positive with the movie in general is that it's not wasting my time. It knows why I'm here. You know, it knows that I'm here for the action sequences. I'm here for, you know, the fun relationship between Bob Odenkirk and Christopher Lloyd and his family. So I agree. It doesn't waste time with convention.
All right. So you want to go to grades?
Yeah, I give it a B-. I thought it was a fun watch. I think it's maybe just a tick above average. I don't think there's anything too remarkable about it aside from the action sequences. I think that I'd be happy to see a sequel of this and see some more of them. I think it would be fun to have one of these every couple of years.
Yeah, I agree with kind of all the points you said. I give this movie a B. I think I would have graded about C+ if it wasn't for Bob Odenkirk and Christopher Lloyd. Honestly, I was going to give it a B-, but Christopher Lloyd's scenes towards the end of the movie in the big kind of climax are what upped my grade for me because they were just so fantastic in the way he plays out in this movie. So yeah. All right, and that's it for our review of Nobody. Nobody is currently in theaters and streaming on VOD. If you like this video, feel free to give it a like, and we'll see you next time.